There's a strange kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from doing too little, but from doing too much, for too long, in the name of becoming better. You feel it when you've ticked off every box on your morning routine, when your bookshelf is lined with promises of transformation, when your calendar is packed with optimization, and yet something still aches, something still feels off. It's the kind of pain no one talks about in the world of self-help. Because how could you possibly feel empty when you're doing everything right? But what if that emptiness is the very clue you've been ignoring? What if this hunger to grow, to fix, to optimize, to improve, isn't a journey toward your true self, but a subtle rejection of who you already are? Somewhere along the way, self-improvement stopped being about healing and became a form of performance. You perform progress, you perform positivity, you perform purpose. But deep down, beneath the routines and the rituals, you start to wonder, am I growing, or just running in a more sophisticated way? Carl Jung warned us that anything we deny in ourselves will eventually rise in the form of fate. And in a culture that worships endless progress, maybe what we're really avoiding is the one thing growth can't give us: stillness, self-acceptance, wholeness. This video is a gentle confrontation, an invitation to look deeper. We'll explore why constant self-help can become a spiritual bypass, how perfectionism hides behind noble intentions, and why true growth is less about becoming more and more about reclaiming what you've lost. If you've ever felt like you're stuck on a hamster wheel of improvement, always becoming but never arriving, then this is the video you weren't supposed to find, but needed to. Let's begin. Self-help is a seductive promise. It tells you that if you read enough, meditate enough, journal enough, you'll finally escape your flaws. You'll be free of your anxiety, your insecurities, your guilt, your fear of not being enough. But that's the illusion. That growth is about escaping yourself. Because hidden beneath the surface of nearly every self-help journey is a quiet but dangerous assumption. There's something wrong with me. And once that belief takes root, everything you do to grow becomes another layer of rejection, another mask, another way to say, who I am right now is not acceptable. What we often mistake for empowerment is actually subtle self-abandonment. You think you're building a better life, but you're building it on the foundation of self-rejection. You meditate not to be present, but to become someone more spiritual. You journal not to listen to yourself, but to rewrite your story so it's more palatable. You pursue purpose, but only the kind that looks impressive online. And slowly, without realizing it, you become a product, a curated version of yourself, always under construction, never quite real. Carl Jung believed that healing isn't about becoming something else. It's about becoming who you truly are, but in the world of self-help, we rarely hear that. Instead, we're sold templates for the ideal human: disciplined, productive, enlightened, fearless. It's a fantasy, not transformation, but performance. And it traps us in a cycle where every breakthrough is followed by a new inadequacy. You read one book and you feel enlightened. Then you see a new technique, a new framework, a new guru, and suddenly you're broken again. The finish line keeps moving. Growth becomes a moving target you can never hit. The self-help industry thrives on this dissatisfaction. If you felt whole, you wouldn't need another program, another course, another dopamine hit, disguised as motivation. So the system feeds on your wounds, gently, politely, while promising it's helping you heal. It's not that self-help is evil, but when it becomes your identity, when you can't rest without feeling lazy or reflect without optimizing, you've entered a trap disguised as liberation. Many people confuse improvement with transformation. They are not the same. Improvement is external. It's metrics, goals, measurements. It's productivity apps and morning routines and crushing it. Transformation, on the other hand, is internal. It's messy, emotional, often invisible. It doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like grief. Sometimes it looks like stillness. And sometimes it looks like losing who you thought you were. The self-help illusion tells you that progress is linear, that you should always be moving forward, always getting better. But life doesn't work like that. The soul doesn't work like that. Real growth often feels like falling apart, like losing your ambition, like waking up and not knowing who you are anymore. And yet, those moments, the ones you're told to fix, are often the ones that hold the most truth. Because, in the silence that follows collapse, the real you has a chance to finally speak. There comes a moment when you look around at all the books, the podcasts, the vision boards, and you wonder, what am I really chasing? Am I trying to become my best self? Or just someone more acceptable to the world? Is this growth? Or is it a more elegant form of self-hatred? These questions hurt, but they're necessary. Because the truth is, no amount of self-help will ever make you feel whole if it's built on the belief that you're broken. Jung once said, "You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become." But becoming isn't about sculpting yourself into an ideal. It's about reclaiming the pieces you lost along the way, the child you buried, the emotions you silenced, the needs you shamed. True healing isn't about climbing higher. It's about digging deeper, beneath the noise, beneath the performance, until you find the quiet truth of who you are before the world told you to be someone else. Perfectionism wears many masks. On the outside, it looks like high standards, discipline, ambition. Society rewards it. Friends admire it. But beneath the polished surface lies something far less glamorous. Fear. The fear of being ordinary. The fear of being judged. The fear of being seen, truly seen, and not being enough. Most people who chase perfection aren't trying to be exceptional. They're trying to be safe. Perfection becomes a shield, a way to avoid the pain of rejection. Because if you're flawless, then no one can criticize you. If you do everything right, then maybe, just maybe, you'll finally be loved in the way you've always longed for. But here's the trap. Perfection is unattainable by design. It's not a goal, it's a ghost, always just out of reach. And the more you chase it, the further you drift from your authenticity. You become a performance, every word calculated, every emotion filtered, every moment turned into content. And slowly the real you, the imperfect, emotional, beautifully messy you, starts to disappear. You become a persona, sculpted not by self-love but by the fear of being unlovable. Carl Jung warned that what we refuse to face within ourselves doesn't just vanish. It sinks into the unconscious and becomes the shadow. And perfectionism is a prime example of this shadow at work. The more you try to perfect yourself, the more you reject what is raw, vulnerable, and real inside you. You suppress your sadness because it's unproductive. You hide your anger because it's ugly. You dismiss your needs because they make you look needy. And in doing so, you abandon the most human parts of yourself, all in the name of being someone else's idea of worthy. This suppression doesn't lead to peace. It leads to pressure. Quiet, chronic, soul-suffocating pressure. You wake up already behind. You go to sleep replaying your mistakes. You live with a constant whisper in the back of your mind. Not enough. Not yet. And you think if you just work harder, plan better, optimize more, that voice will go away. But it won't. Because the voice isn't coming from failure. It's coming from the belief that your worth depends on success. That belief is the root. Perfectionism is just the symptom. What makes perfectionism so deceptive is that it masquerades as virtue. We admire the overachiever, the multitasker, the person who has it all together. But we rarely ask, at what cost? What's the price of always being composed, always achieving, always smiling when you want to scream? For many, the cost is profound. They lose touch with their spontaneity, their creativity, their inner child. They lose the ability to rest without guilt or play without purpose. Everything becomes a project, even healing. Jung taught that true growth doesn't come from perfecting the self, but from integrating it. That means embracing contradictions, not eliminating them. It means allowing yourself to be both strong and soft, both confident and insecure. It means letting go of the fantasy that one day you'll wake up completely healed, completely fearless, completely whole. That day will never come, because you're not meant to become perfect. You're meant to become real. So what are you really chasing when you chase perfection? Is it excellence or is it approval? Is it mastery, or is it the feeling of finally being enough? These questions cut deep because they expose the emotional wounds we try so hard to hide with polished lives and perfect plans. But the wound is where the light enters, and until you face it, you'll keep performing instead of living. You'll keep proving instead of being. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you let go of perfection. Not the reckless freedom of giving up, but the sacred freedom of showing up, flawed, uncertain, honest. The kind of freedom that allows you to make mistakes without self-hatred. That allows you to succeed without losing your soul. That allows you to love yourself not because you're perfect, but because you're you. And in that moment, you stop chasing shadows. You stop running from yourself. And you finally come home. We live in a culture where productivity is no longer just a virtue, it's a religion. It promises salvation through checklists, worth through output, and redemption through hustle. If you're busy, you must be important. If you're tired, you must be doing something right. Rest is no longer a need. It's a guilty pleasure, a luxury reserved for the lazy or the unambitious. But here's the question we rarely stop long enough to ask. Productivity. For what? What are we really trying to achieve, and why does doing more never seem to feel like enough? Many people unconsciously use productivity as a coping mechanism, a way to avoid the silence, the emptiness, the unresolved parts of themselves. Busyness becomes a distraction from emotional pain. Constant motion becomes a buffer against anxiety, against loneliness, against the existential dread of simply being. You can't hear the cries of your soul when your calendar is always full. And maybe that's the point. Because deep down, many of us are terrified of what we'll hear in the silence. We don't just fear being unproductive, we fear being alone with ourselves. Carl Jung wrote extensively about the danger of living on the surface. When we focus only on doing and neglect being, we cut ourselves off from the inner world. We forget that we are not machines. We are not here to be efficient. We are not designed to be optimized. We are human beings, full of contradiction, emotion, longing, confusion. And those parts don't go away just because we ignore them. They fester in the shadow. They show up in burnout, in breakdowns, in the quiet moments when you finally stop and realize, I've built a life that looks good, but doesn't feel good. Productivity, when used unconsciously, becomes a form of dissociation. Instead of processing our grief, we organize our inbox. Instead of exploring our desires, we finish another project. Instead of asking ourselves what we truly want, we write another to-do list. And all the while, the deeper self waits, patiently, painfully, for us to come home. It waits in the dreams we forget, in the hobbies we abandon, in the stillness we avoid. It waits not with judgment, but with hope. Hope that one day we'll stop running and finally turn inward. The irony is that the more we chase productivity, the more we lose the very things that make us whole. We lose creativity because it requires boredom and daydreaming. We lose intimacy because it requires presence and vulnerability. We lose intuition because it speaks softly and cannot be scheduled. We even lose meaning because meaning is not found in tasks completed, but in truths uncovered. The soul does not speak the language of spreadsheets. It speaks in symbols, in silence, in serendipity. This doesn't mean that structure or goals are bad. Jung would never suggest abandoning discipline or ambition, but he would ask, are they serving the ego or the self? Is your work aligned with your essence, or is it a mask you wear to avoid your pain? These questions are uncomfortable. They disrupt the comforting narrative that more is always better. But they are necessary, because true growth doesn't happen when you're constantly doing. It happens when you dare to stop, when you dare to listen. To break free from the productivity trap is not to become lazy, it's to become conscious. It's to ask yourself why you need to stay busy. What are You afraid will rise to the surface if you stop? What old wound? What buried fear? What ungrieved loss is waiting in the silence? These are not easy questions. They demand courage, honesty, and time. 3 things modern life tries to steal from you every day. But facing them is the only way to reclaim your wholeness. There is a deeper kind of productivity, one that is not measured in metrics but in meaning. It's the productivity of healing, of reconnecting, of integration. It's when your inner world and outer actions begin to align, when your life becomes not just a series of tasks, but a reflection of your truth. This kind of productivity doesn't burn you out, it fills you, it grounds you, it frees you. And in that space, you don't just do it, you become. We are constantly being sold an image, the ideal self. It's polished, productive, emotionally intelligent, physically fit, endlessly positive, and spiritually aware. It's the version of you that wakes up early, meditates, crushes goals, and still has time to post about it with a perfectly filtered smile. But here's the problem. The ideal self is not real. It's a fantasy, a mask, a projection of collective expectations, not a reflection of your true essence. And yet we compare ourselves to it relentlessly. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the social face we wear to navigate the demands of society. It's not inherently bad. We need some form of persona to function in relationships, workplaces, communities. But the problem arises when we confuse the persona for the self, when we believe we are that idealized image, or worse, that we should be. In chasing this mirage, we fracture our identity. We start to reject anything that doesn't fit the script. Our messiness, our pain, our contradictions, they become enemies in the pursuit of perfection. This creates a subtle but devastating form of self-abandonment. You start curating your personality instead of discovering it. You shape yourself into who you think you're supposed to be, rather than honoring who you truly are. And the more you succeed at performing this ideal, the more hollow you feel inside. Because deep down you know it's not you. It's an act, a role, a performance you've learned to play so well that you've forgotten it was a mask in the first place. Social media, advertising, even some modern self-help literature, they all feed this illusion. They present self-development not as a return to wholeness, but as a race toward flawlessness, a race you can never win, because the ideal self keeps shifting. There's always someone more optimized, more enlightened, more together than you. The game is rigged to keep you feeling like you're not enough, and to keep you consuming more in the hope that one day you will be. But real healing, as Jung emphasized, comes not from becoming something better, but from becoming more whole. And wholeness includes everything: your light and your shadow, your strengths and your wounds, your beauty and your chaos. The goal is not to become the perfect person. It's to become a true person, a soul in motion, alive in its complexity. Jung's path of individuation is not about reaching an ideal. It's about integrating all the fragmented parts of yourself that you've exiled in the name of fitting in. This means embracing the aspects of you that don't photograph well, the rage you suppress, the fear you hide, the grief you never processed. These parts are not obstacles to your growth. They are your growth. They are the raw material through which your deeper self speaks. And the more you deny them, the more you live inauthentically. You might appear successful on the outside, but inside there's a quiet ache, a longing for truth, for freedom, for realness. To escape the trap of the ideal self, you have to stop asking, "How can I be better?" and start asking, "Who am I really?" That question is uncomfortable. It doesn't come with 5 easy steps. It can't be monetized or neatly packaged. It requires you to slow down, strip away the masks, and face the parts of yourself that don't fit the performance. But in doing so, you begin the real work of becoming. Not becoming the ideal, but becoming you. You might lose people. You might disappoint others. But you will gain something far more precious: inner alignment. When the persona falls away, what's left is not failure, it's authenticity, it's soul. And in that space, you begin to live from the inside out, not the outside in. You stop performing your life and start inhabiting it. That's the difference between image and identity, between illusion and truth, between the mask you wear and the self you are. The culture of self-improvement is often sold as liberation, but beneath the surface it can easily become another form of rejection, a way of saying to yourself, "You're not good enough as you are." Wrapped in language that sounds empowering, discipline, goals, transformation, it hides a subtle violence. The idea that your current self is wrong, broken, or unworthy. What begins as a journey of growth quickly morphs into a campaign of internal erasure. This is the dark side of self-help that few people talk about. It disguises itself as motivation, but often stems from self-loathing. It teaches you to edit yourself, fix yourself, polish and repackage your flaws until you become someone others will love, or someone you might finally approve of. But real transformation doesn't come from hatred. It doesn't come from war against the self. It comes from compassion, from integration, from understanding your wounds instead of waging war on them. Carl Jung taught that healing is not about becoming better, but becoming whole. When we confuse improvement with elimination, we fall into a trap, one where we try to cut out the very parts of ourselves that are asking to be healed. Think of a child crying out, and instead of listening, you silence them, telling them to behave, to grow up, to be quiet. That's what many of us do to our inner selves when we embark on this hyper-productive, improvement-obsessed path. We mute our humanity in the name of progress. And it's easy to do because the world rewards performance over authenticity. If you act like you have it together, no one questions what you've lost in the process. You get likes, promotions, admiration. But deep down, you know something is missing. The more you improve, the more distant you feel from yourself. Not because you've changed, but because you've amputated the parts that didn't fit the narrative. You've mistaken silence for strength, control for healing. Real growth doesn't demand the death of your imperfections. It asks you to bring them into the light, to sit with them, to understand why they exist. Maybe your procrastination is not laziness, but fear. Maybe your anxiety is not weakness, but a response to deep emotional neglect. Maybe your anger is not something to suppress, but a signal that a boundary has been crossed. In rejecting these signals, you don't become better. You become blind. You disconnect from the very compass trying to guide you toward wholeness. This kind of blind self-improvement often creates a fragmented self, one that's polished on the surface but full of unacknowledged pain underneath. You build a life that looks beautiful from the outside but feels hollow inside. Because you've built it on the foundation of rejection, not acceptance. You've traded presence for performance, embodiment for image. And eventually, that kind of life starts to collapse, and because no true self can survive under layers of constant correction. The paradox is this: true change only begins when you stop trying to change. When you stop treating yourself like a problem to solve and start relating to yourself like a story to understand. Growth that's rooted in love doesn't demand that you be different. It invites you to be more fully you. That might mean unlearning things, letting go of roles you never chose, shedding masks that no longer fit. It's not glamorous. It's not always productive. But it's real. It's sustainable. It heals instead of hides. The question isn't, how can I become better? It's, what have I abandoned in myself in the name of becoming better? That's where the truth lives. That's where integration begins. And when you start there, from a place of curiosity instead of criticism, gentleness instead of judgment, you don't just improve, you return to yourself, to your soul. And in that return, you realize the goal was never to become someone else. It was to come home. At some point, what began as a sacred search for meaning, for self-knowledge, healing, wholeness, was intercepted by profit. Capitalism, with its insatiable appetite, found a new frontier in your pain, your insecurities, your longing to evolve. It took the deeply human desire to grow and turned it into a never-ending marketplace, Books, courses, masterminds, retreats, supplements, an entire economy now orbits around your perceived inadequacy. And this isn't accidental, it's by design. Growth became productized, and once that happened, it could be sold, endlessly. But the trick of capitalism is that it never wants you to arrive. It thrives on the illusion that you're always one step away from being enough. It whispers, "You're close, but not quite there. Buy this, follow that, upgrade this part of yourself." The journey becomes less about true transformation and more about consumption. You're not evolving. You're shopping for a better version of yourself. You're investing in self-help, but never truly helping yourself. This distortion doesn't just exploit your wounds. It ensures they stay open. Why? Because healed people don't need to be sold their worth. They're no longer manipulable, so the system feeds on your unfinishedness. It thrives on your sense of not there yet. Even the language has changed. You're a high performer, a peak optimizer, a biohacker. These words don't invite reflection. They push you to compete, to produce, to achieve. But achieve what? And for whom? Jung understood that wholeness is internal, intimate, and often invisible. But capitalism hates what it can't measure or monetize. So instead of encouraging you to explore your soul, it sells you external badges of transformation, shredded abs, seven-figure businesses, morning routines optimized down to the second. And if you stray from the path, the algorithm will remind you. Social media, podcasts, ads, they all echo the same chorus. You're falling. Behind, you should be more, do more, be better. This constant push toward optimization creates a state of chronic self-surveillance. You begin to analyze your life not through the lens of fulfillment, but efficiency. Your healing becomes a checklist. Your growth becomes a brand. You post your cold plunges and journal prompts and gratitude lists like trophies of progress, not because you're present, but because you're performing. Somewhere along the way, the inner work stopped being about you. It became about optics, validation, metrics, influence. And let's be clear, growth is not the enemy. The hunger to evolve is natural, noble, even sacred. But when that hunger is hijacked by a system that profits from your dissatisfaction, it warps into addiction. You become hooked on self-improvement the way others are hooked on social media, always chasing a hit of "I'm finally becoming someone." But you never land. Because in this version of the world, you were never meant to land. That would ruin the business model. So what do you do in a world that sells you your own worth at a markup? You wake up. You reclaim your growth from the marketplace. You return to your own soul and ask, what does healing mean for me? Not for the algorithm, not for the guru, not for the brand, but for me? That question changes everything. It stops the cycle of extraction and reorients you toward something real, something sacred, something slow. Capitalism will keep shouting, but your soul doesn't shout, it whispers. And to hear it, you have to step off the wheel. You have to stop chasing, buying, proving. You have to let yourself be unfinished, imperfect, and real. And in that space, the space where no one is trying to sell you anything, you may discover the truest form of growth, the kind that can't be marketed, tracked, or monetized, the kind that belongs to you. Self-optimization, once seen as a healthy pursuit of personal growth, has morphed into an unrelenting pressure to achieve an ever-expanding set of goals. What was once the quest for self-improvement has transformed into a rat race of becoming the best version of oneself. But in this race, we often forget what truly matters: inner peace. The more we optimize, the further we stray from the sense of stillness and acceptance that is fundamental to our well-being. Each new trend, from biohacking and productivity routines to self-care rituals and digital detoxes, promises to bring us closer to a more optimized life. But ironically, the more we seek these external forms of betterment, the more we find ourselves trapped in a cycle of stress and burnout. We may gain more time, more energy, and more success in our external worlds, but internally, we remain restless, dissatisfied, and overwhelmed. The quest for self-optimization might bring fleeting moments of achievement, but it's rarely accompanied by the deeper, enduring peace we're truly searching for. The truth is that self-optimization is an illusion. It tells us that we must constantly be doing, achieving, and improving in order to be worthy. But this relentless drive undermines the very essence of peace, the ability to simply be. Peace doesn't come from squeezing every last drop of potential out of ourselves, nor does it come from the endless pursuit of accolades or accomplishments. True peace emerges when we stop striving and allow ourselves to exist as we are, without the constant pressure to do more, to be more. We have become conditioned to equate self-worth with achievement. It's as if our value is determined by how much we can optimize, how much we can accomplish in a given day. But this only leads to an increasing sense of emptiness. The moment we achieve one goal, another arises, and the cycle continues. We never truly arrive. Peace remains out of reach, not because it is unattainable, but because we are too busy chasing external markers of success to pause, reflect, and embrace the quiet contentment of simply existing. This constant pursuit of self-optimization breeds anxiety. The fear of not being enough, not doing enough, permeates every aspect of our lives. We measure our worth through metrics: the number of tasks completed, the hours spent working, the results produced. But these metrics are superficial. They ignore the intangible, yet essential elements of life, like emotional connection, inner balance, and the quiet moments of joy that come from being present. In a world obsessed with efficiency and productivity, the very idea of slowing down is often seen as a weakness. But slowing down is not a luxury. It's a necessity for mental and emotional health. Without it, we are simply running on a treadmill, constantly going through the motions, but never truly living. The pursuit of inner peace requires the courage to step off that treadmill, to stop optimizing for a moment, and to embrace the discomfort of stillness. And it is only in that stillness that we find the peace we crave. Self-optimization in its purest form is not about maximizing every part of yourself. It's about understanding and accepting who you truly are. It's about learning to live with your imperfections, your flaws, and your limitations. True growth isn't found in pushing yourself to be perfect. It's found in the radical acceptance of your whole self, without the need for constant improvement. When we stop chasing an idealized version of ourselves, we allow ourselves to rest in the present moment, unburdened by the pressure to become someone we are not. To regain peace, we must relinquish the idea that we must always be working on ourselves. We must stop comparing ourselves to the filtered images of success that the world projects and instead embrace our authentic selves. Only then can we cultivate a sense of inner peace that is lasting and deeply fulfilling. Peace is not something we achieve through doing. It is something we create by being. In a world that constantly pushes for more success, more productivity, more achievements, it's no wonder that so many of us feel like we are never enough. This feeling of inadequacy isn't an accident. It's engineered, deeply ingrained into the very fabric of our society, and it plays a significant role in keeping us locked in a perpetual cycle of striving and dissatisfaction. From a young age, we are taught that our value is tied to what we do and achieve. We are conditioned to measure ourselves by external standards, grades, promotions, likes, and followers, rather than internal qualities such as kindness, authenticity, or emotional intelligence. The result? We grow up believing that our worth is always in flux, always dependent on our next accomplishment, on our next win. But no matter how much we achieve, we're left feeling like there's always something more to be done. It's as if we are constantly chasing an elusive version of ourselves, the one that will finally be good enough. But this idealized version is a moving target, always just out of reach. The truth is, this endless cycle is by design. It's a trap, a carefully constructed narrative that keeps us chasing external validation while ignoring the more profound truth that we are already enough just as we are. This engineered sense of never being enough is reinforced by the capitalist structures that dominate our world. Advertisements, media, and even the workplace thrive on creating feelings of inadequacy in order to sell us solutions. From beauty products promising to make us look younger, to the latest self-help trends designed to make us more successful. The message is always the same. You're not enough, but if you buy this, do that, or become this, you will be. And yet the cycle never ends. Once we've achieved one goal, another one emerges, and the feeling of inadequacy lingers, masked by our pursuit of the next prize. This strategy is deeply psychological. It plays on our fear of being left behind, of being seen as inferior. The more we believe we are not enough, the more likely we are to seek out external sources of validation. We buy into the illusion that if we just tweak this part of ourselves, adjust that behavior, or attain that external status, then we'll finally feel complete. But the truth is, no amount of external validation can ever fill the deep internal void created by the belief that we are not inherently worthy. The truth behind why we never feel enough is rooted in our deep-seated fears of not being loved, accepted, or valued. These fears often originate in childhood, where we learn to seek approval from our caregivers, teachers, and peers. If we're not given enough positive reinforcement, or if we're criticized too harshly, we internalize the belief that we must constantly prove ourselves to be worthy of love and acceptance. These patterns stick with us throughout life, even when we reach adulthood and achieve everything we once thought would make us feel whole. The fear of not being enough is insidious. It masquerades as motivation, driving us to strive and achieve, to constantly improve and grow. But what begins as a healthy desire for growth quickly morphs into a toxic need for validation. We become trapped in a cycle of overwork and self-criticism, unable to rest in the peace of knowing that we are worthy, simply because we exist. Until we address the root cause of this feeling, the belief that we are inherently lacking, we will continue to feel unfulfilled, no matter how much we achieve. Breaking free from the cycle of inadequacy requires us to shift our perspective from external validation to internal acceptance. It involves unlearning the harmful beliefs that tell us our worth is conditional on our achievements and reprogramming our minds to embrace the truth that we are enough exactly as we are. This is not a quick fix or a simple solution. It takes time, introspection, and a willingness to confront the deeper wounds that make us feel unworthy. The journey to self-acceptance requires us to let go of the illusions that keep us stuck in the cycle of constant improvement. We must redefine success, not as the accumulation of achievements or accolades, but as the ability to love and accept ourselves without condition. This shift allows us to stop chasing the ever-elusive, perfect version of ourselves and start embracing the imperfect, authentic self that has always been enough. True peace comes from within, and once we stop seeking validation from the outside, we can finally find the inner fulfillment we've been searching for all along. Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist and father of analytical psychology, had a profound understanding of the human psyche. One of his central ideas was that the path to self-realization, or individuation, requires the integration of all parts of the self, not just the parts we admire, but also the shadowy, hidden aspects that we reject. The process of individuation is about moving beyond the ego's narrow self-interest and embracing a fuller, more authentic sense of self. It's about wholeness, not perfection. This is where modern self-help culture often goes astray. So much of contemporary personal development focuses on the ego, the part of us that craves validation, success, and recognition. Self-help books, motivational speakers, and productivity gurus promise to help you become the best version of yourself, but they often ignore the deeper, more transformative work of integrating the unconscious aspects of the psyche. Instead of focusing on wholeness, the self-help industry tends to emphasize achieving external success, often reinforcing the ego's desire for approval. For Jung, this emphasis on ego was dangerous. The more we identify with the ego and its pursuits, the further we move from our true selves. When we neglect the deeper, unconscious parts of the psyche, we risk becoming fragmented, chasing an image of ourselves that is shallow and incomplete. Jung believed that true growth, true transformation, could only occur when we acknowledged and integrated both the light and dark aspects of who we are, leading to a more authentic, whole self. Jung would argue that the rise of self-help culture is, in many ways, a manifestation of our collective desire to control our lives and our destinies. We live in a world that values achievement, control, and mastery, and the self-help industry preys on these desires. But Jung cautioned against the overemphasis on the ego's pursuit of success and self-improvement, as it can lead to a distortion of the true self. The ego thrives on external validation. It wants to be admired, recognized, and praised, but it is not the source of genuine happiness or fulfillment. In Jungian psychology, the ego is a necessary part of the self, but it is only a part. It is the conscious, rational mind that helps us navigate the world, but it is not the totality of who we are. The ego, in fact, can be a barrier to true self-realization if we become too attached to it. The unconscious, the deeper layers of the psyche, contains valuable wisdom that can guide us toward wholeness. But in self-help culture, we are often encouraged to focus exclusively on the conscious ego, to fix ourselves, to become better, without ever questioning what better really means. True growth, according to Jung, is not about becoming the perfect version of ourselves or meeting society's standards of success. It's about integrating all aspects of the self, including the unconscious. This requires embracing our imperfections, our vulnerabilities, and even our darkness. It's only by accepting and integrating the shadow, those parts of ourselves that we reject or deny, that we can achieve wholeness. Without this integration, we remain trapped in the ego's narrow definition of who we are. Jung's idea of individuation stands in stark contrast to the self-help culture's focus on perfectionism. While self-help advocates may push for constant improvement, productivity hacks, and achievement, Jungian psychology encourages us to slow down and look inward. Instead of focusing solely on external success or chasing the next big goal, individuation invites us to explore the inner terrain of the psyche, to confront the parts of ourselves we've hidden away and to seek deeper meaning in our lives. The process of individuation is not quick or easy. It involves facing our fears, acknowledging our flaws, and embracing the parts of ourselves that we have disowned. This is in direct opposition to the self-help culture's promise of a quick fix, a fast path to success, and a better, more successful version of ourselves. But Jung would argue that this superficial approach to self-improvement ultimately leaves us unfulfilled. True transformation, he would say, happens when we stop chasing external validation and start listening to the wisdom of the unconscious, which speaks to us through dreams, symbols, and the deep yearning of the soul. Ultimately, Jung's view of self-help culture would be one of both concern and caution. While he would not reject the idea of personal growth entirely, he would urge us to reconsider what we mean by growth. True growth is not simply about acquiring more skills, achieving more success, or becoming more productive. It is about becoming more whole, more integrated, and more authentic. It is about confronting our shadows, accepting our imperfections, and finding peace with the parts of ourselves that we once rejected. The self-help culture, with its focus on the ego's desires and external success, can never provide the deep, lasting fulfillment that comes from inner integration. To truly grow, we must look beyond the surface and engage with the unconscious, embracing the full spectrum of our humanity. When we do, we embark on a journey of transformation that leads to a richer, more meaningful life, one that is grounded in authenticity and wholeness, not in the relentless pursuit of external approval. In the pursuit of self-improvement, we often find ourselves chasing an elusive and distorted ideal of perfection. This myth of perfection is deeply embedded in modern culture, propagated by a society that values achievement, success, and flawless performance. We are taught that growth means becoming a better version of ourselves, one who has mastered all of their flaws, fears, and imperfections. However, this vision of growth is not only unrealistic, it is also incomplete. According to Carl Jung, true growth lies not in perfection, but in integration. Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming whole, emphasizes the integration of all parts of the self. Rather than striving to eliminate our imperfections or reach some idealized version of ourselves, Jung argued that growth occurs when we accept and integrate all aspects of who we are, both the light and the dark. The goal is not to perfect ourselves, but to embrace the full spectrum of our humanity. Perfection in this sense becomes a trap, leading us to constantly strive for something that does not exist. It feeds into the ego's desire for external validation and approval, while the true path to wholeness involves turning inward and acknowledging the parts of ourselves that we have neglected or rejected. When we stop trying to achieve perfection, we can begin the deeper, more meaningful work of self-acceptance and integration. This doesn't mean that we stop growing or evolving, but rather that we understand growth as a process of integration, of weaving together the fragmented parts of the self into a more cohesive and authentic whole. One of the most profound lessons Jung taught was that the process of individuation is lifelong and ongoing. There is no endpoint, no finish line where we become perfect or fully realized. Instead, individuation is about continually integrating the unconscious aspects of the self and learning to live with our contradictions and complexities. This process is not linear or smooth. It involves periods of discomfort, confrontation with the shadow, and the acceptance of the parts of ourselves that we have rejected. But through this process, we become more whole. In self-help culture, the pressure to constantly improve, to be better, to achieve more, creates a sense of inadequacy. We are led to believe that we are never enough, that we must always do more in order to be worthy. But Jungian psychology challenges this notion. It encourages us to stop seeking perfection and instead focus on integrating the parts of ourselves that have been cast aside, the aspects that we have denied or ignored. In the pursuit of external validation, true growth, Jung would say, comes from accepting all of ourselves, not just the parts that society deems acceptable or worthy. By integrating the shadow, embracing our weaknesses, and acknowledging our flaws, we move toward a more authentic and complete sense of self. It is through this acceptance and integration that we can experience real growth that is grounded in self-love, authenticity, and a deeper understanding of our true nature. The myth of perfection is pervasive in the world of self-help, but it is also deeply destructive. It creates an endless cycle of striving, where we are constantly seeking external approval and validation. The more we chase this ideal, the further we move away from who we truly are. This is why, in Jung's view, self-help culture often leads to dissatisfaction and emptiness. The focus is on external success, productivity, and performance, rather than on the internal work of self-discovery and integration. Jung would argue that the desire for perfection is rooted in the ego's fear of vulnerability. The ego wants to appear strong, competent, and in control. It wants to present an image of itself that is flawless and unblemished. But this image is not who we truly are. It is a facade, a mask that hides our true selves. True growth, according to Jung, occurs when we remove the mask and allow ourselves to be seen in our entirety, flaws, imperfections, and all. It is only when we accept ourselves as we are, without the need for external validation, that we can begin to experience real transformation. The pursuit of perfection can be a never-ending journey, one that leads only to exhaustion and frustration. But the journey of integration is different. It is a path that invites us to embrace our contradictions, to live with our flaws, and to accept that we are always a work in progress. True growth, Jung would say, is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. In the end, true growth is not about fixing ourselves or striving for an unattainable ideal. It is about becoming more authentic, more whole, and more integrated. It is about accepting ourselves as we are, with all of our imperfections, flaws, and contradictions. By embracing the process of individuation, the journey toward wholeness, we can transcend the ego's need for perfection and begin living a more authentic and meaningful life. Jung believed that the key to true self-realization was the integration of the unconscious with the conscious self. This process involves embracing our shadow, confronting our fears, and accepting the parts of ourselves that we have rejected. It is through this process of integration that we become more complete, more aligned with our true nature. Perfection is not the goal. Wholeness is. True growth, then, is not a destination, but a journey. It is a journey of self-discovery, acceptance, and integration. It is a journey that requires us to confront our deepest fears, to embrace our vulnerabilities, and to accept that we are not perfect, but we are whole. Only when we stop chasing perfection and start embracing our wholeness can we experience the true depth of growth and transformation that lies within us all. As we come to the end of this exploration of self-improvement and growth, it's clear that the road we walk is not one that leads to a perfect destination. Instead, it's a winding, complex journey that invites us to embrace both the light and the dark within ourselves. The trap of constant self-improvement lies in the illusion that we can ever reach an ideal version of ourselves, the perfect self that society, media, and even the self-help industry push us toward. This journey, however, isn't about achieving perfection. It's about integrating all parts of who we are, learning to accept the contradictions, flaws, and imperfections that make us human. True growth, as Carl Jung taught, is about wholeness, the integration of our unconscious selves with our conscious reality. It's not about getting rid of the shadow or the parts of ourselves we don't like, but about accepting them, learning from them, and integrating them into our whole being. The pursuit of perfection ultimately keeps us trapped in a cycle of dissatisfaction, never quite feeling enough, always reaching for something just out of reach. But when we shift our focus from perfection to integration, we open the door to authentic growth. We begin to understand that the ideal self is not a fixed external goal. It's a fluid, evolving process that involves embracing who we are in the present, with all our contradictions. We find peace not in the illusion of perfection, but in the acceptance of imperfection. True growth is not a race to become better by society's standards, but a lifelong journey of becoming more ourselves, of aligning with our true nature, and of living authentically. So next time you find yourself caught in the trap of self-improvement, remember, the most powerful form of growth is not the pursuit of an unattainable ideal, but the courage to accept and integrate all parts of yourself. In doing so, you become not only a more complete person, but a more authentic and peaceful one as well. Growth, in its truest form, is not about perfection. It's about integration, wholeness, and embracing the full spectrum of who you are.